Hello everyone, this is the Undying Nephilim, and at long last today I will be showing the faction that most of you have been waiting for. If you couldn't tell from the screen, it is the Darknuts. Just a little preface before I continue with this video. I was never really a huge fan of the Darknuts, especially in the Total War version of the game, but after getting them in 0 AD, I actually think these guys are probably my favorite faction. They have a lot of really cool features, and I'll be showing pretty much all of them today. They're really cool, and I really have a feeling this is probably the point where a lot of the holdouts will probably start hopping over from the Total War version of the game, because I think the Darknuts really show just what this engine is capable of. But anyway, as usual, I have instant build on, and also as usual, the Darknuts have 4 different heroes you can pick from. I will talk about them in a separate video, along with the 4 Moblin heroes, so we won't worry about them for now. So, anyway, the last video I showed the Moblins, and the Moblins and the Darknuts are basically complete polar opposites. The Moblins have, they don't really have a centralized base. They don't even have a civil center. They kind of have these little crappy buildings that you can pack up and move around. They're really nomadic. The Darknuts are the exact opposite. They have a single super duper powerful, heavily defensible base. If you played Rise of Nations or Battle for Middle-earth, you kind of have an idea of what their bases are like. They kind of have like the central core here, and then they have all of these plots around the base that you transform into extensions of this base. So you can build like a barracks and a little tower, and I'll go ahead and show the different things you can put on the plots in just a second. So yeah, the Darknuts, they technically can't build a new base, so you can't like select your workers and then build another one of these civil centers somewhere else on the map. They can't do that, so that's already a pretty stark difference from any of the other factions. However, they do have methods of getting more than one base, which I will show at a later point in this video. I won't show that first, but what should I talk about first? There's a lot to talk about with these guys. So I talked about how their bases kind of work, and I'll go ahead and show how their bases work in just a second. Some other features that they have is not all of their units, but most of their units can level up like heroes. And depending on which Darknut hero you pick, certain units can level up that normally can't. I'll go ahead and show their units leveling up after I show the bases too. I'm trying to think if there's any other like important like broad general features before I go into any details. I guess I'll go ahead and show the bases first, and I'll move on to other stuff. So I'll move their guys out of the way. I'll go ahead and build some vineyards first. So yeah, if you played Rise of Nations or Battle for Middle-earth, you'll kind of recognize what's going on here. So you click on the little plot, and then you have down here you have a list of the options you can upgrade. Actually, if you played the Gorons, they're kind of similar to the Gorons, but even more like heavily centralized. So if you played the Gorons, you'll be familiar with how you click on the plots and then upgrade the plots into their various buildings. So right here I built 3 of the farming buildings that the Darknuts have. Unlike farms from other factions, you don't click on the workers and then you right click on the farms and they gather from them and then they take them to a drop-off point. The Darknuts, you actually garrison their workers inside of the farms, and then they kind of just stay at the farm and harvest them that way. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. I'll go ahead and garrison some of their workers inside. So if you look here, the little workers are garrisoned inside the farm, and if you look at the top here, their food count will trickle up. It's a pretty slow rate, but you can upgrade the vineyards and the workers to gather food faster. So So yeah, that's how the Darknuts gather food. They can also gather food from bushes and also hunt from animals like the little cuckoos here. So they have a lot of different options when it comes to getting food, but their most stable and best option is building their little vineyards and then garrisoning their workers inside the vineyards. And then it's a lot easier to protect them, and you kind of have like a centralized location from which you can gather food. However, space is at a premium, so you might not want to build a lot of vineyards at your base. You might actually want to expand out and find other places of food and maybe have just 1 or 2 vineyards. Because as I pointed out already, the Darknuts can't really easily expand their base. They're very much designed to be a super centralized faction where you have to defend your main base until you build up a large enough army to push back against your enemy. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. So yeah, that is the main way the Darknuts gather food. I will just go ahead and upgrade all these plots with their various buildings, and I guess I'll show their units. Oh, actually, since we're on the subject of resources and expanding bases, I will build, where is it? Their storehouse. So, like I said, the Darknuts cannot build a second base with their workers, so they can't easily expand. However, map control obviously is a really important thing because you need to get resources to fuel your creation of armies and stuff. So they can't just, plop down a civil center or a storehouse like way out over here and start gathering these rupees. So instead, when you build a Darknut storehouse, what happens is it generates 3 of these carts completely for free. If one of them is destroyed, the storehouse will spawn the 3rd one again for free. So every storehouse you build creates 3 of them. So if you want more than 3, you just build more storehouses. But these carts are basically little mobile drop-off points. So your workers will be able to drop off resources at them. So if you wanted to, say, go gather from this little rupee deposit up here, which is kind of far from your base, you just move the cart up by it, like so. And then you can send your workers out to gather from it. I'll go ahead and make some workers and send them to gather from it. And that is one of the ways they can claim distant resources that are kind of far away from their base, which I thought was a pretty clever solution. This is also an example of something Exodarian just got to work in the game, where an entity can spawn other entities around itself, which is what the storehouse here is doing. It's spawning these carts, so that's pretty cool. And then when they gather the rupees, I'll just bring them back to the cart instead of going all the way back to the storehouse there. So that is sort of a way that they can have some map control, though that's not the only way. I will go into more detail how else they can expand later. So yeah, that's how they can get distant resources. So I will show their units now. So let me build all of their troop centers, and I'll go ahead and train all of their units, and I'll show you what they all do, because they have a lot of really, really cool units. So, which one should I start with? I'll start with their I guess their weakest units. Although they're, as you'll see, the Darknuts aren't exactly weak. Even their weakest units are pretty darn powerful. Alrighty, so actually, that is not the first unit in the Darknuts roster. The first unit, other than the worker, that you'll be able to train as the Darknuts is the Mulgura Grub, which is actually their scout unit. It's this little tiny creature unit. If you played Wind Waker, you're familiar with it. Like his big doofy smile when he looks around after you click on him. But so yeah, the Mulgura is this little worm thing. It's not a particularly strong creature. It's meant to detect stealth units, which aren't in the game yet. But when stealth units are in the game, you'll want to train a few of these guys so you can detect the invisible units. Because what they do is they can sense the vibrations on the ground. So if there's like a Sheikah that's trying to sneak up on it, it'll be able to know there's a Sheikah there. So that is why these guys are used as their detector units. Until stealth is added into the engine, they're just a scout unit. So they have a pretty good line of sight, although I have the whole map revealed, so I can't really show that, but they have a pretty good line of sight, and you can use them to scout out the map and keep track of your enemy and things like that. So that is the Mulgira Grub. Pretty cool little scout unit. I actually think it's, other than the Gerudo scout unit, I think it's my favorite scout unit in the game right now, just because I think they look pretty cool. They're really fun to animate too. So yeah, that is their scout unit. The first real combat unit that the Darknuts can train is the Gymnatai. This guy right here, he is a Darknut with a little Khopesh. Well, it's not really a little Khopesh, it's pretty big, but he's just kind of a unarmored Darknut with a Khopesh in his arm. Even though he is the weakest and the lightest of the Darknuts units, he is still pretty strong for a unit. So if he went against like a Hylian Town Guard or a Gerudo Marauder, he'd probably win in a one-on-one fight. Darknut units are really strong. Just to get that out of the way, like on a 1-versus-1 basis, like each of their units just are incredibly strong. However, they are very expensive to train relative to the units of other factions, and as you'll see as I start moving them around, they're very slow. Like, I mean, this one isn't too slow, but he moves slower than like even the Knights of Hyrule, which are, you know, the Hylian's heavily armored unit. So most of the Darknut units are they're I'm repeating myself. They're really, really slow. So a lot of other factions can easily outmaneuver them. So you have to do several things to account for that, which I'll show when I get to their mercenary building. But anyway, that is the Gymnatai. It is a light melee Darknut unit, not particularly special. You'll just crank them out probably at the start of the game so you have something to protect your base with. The second Darknut unit that you can train is the Hoplite, which is this little guy here with a spear and a shield. They're a bit stronger, or should I say they're a bit more durable than the Gymnatai, because they actually wear armor and they have a little shield. So they're resistant to range attacks because they have a shield, and because they have a spear, they are anti-cavalry. So as most spearmen units, they're really good against cavalry. Cavalry is a really good tactic to use against the Darknuts because a lot of cavalry is resistant to knockback. So if you're playing as the Darknuts, you'll want quite a few hoplites in your army, especially if you're going against a cavalry-heavy faction like Ordana. These guys are, I mean, they're expensive, but they're relatively cheap for a Darknut unit, so you can field quite a few of them to handle cavalry. So that is the Hoplite. A cheaper early game anti-cavalry unit. And then the third unit is one of the only ranged units the Darknuts have. The Darknuts are very, very, very low and weak when it comes to ranged units. They're a very, very melee focused faction, but they do have several ranged units, and the first one, and probably the most important one, is the Peltast here. It's this little guy here that has a bunch of javelins, and he basically tosses the javelins. For a ranged unit, their range actually isn't very long, but they deal knockback damage. So if they throw a javelin at an enemy and it hits the enemy, they'll go flying back a little bit. I'll go ahead and show that a little bit later in this video. I'll go ahead and show the... Actually, I have a video that I've already put up showing the Darknuts kicking the crap out of a bunch of Hylians with their knockback ability. So if you just want to see that on a huge scale, go ahead and look up that video. But yeah, the Peltasts can deal knockback damage. So even though it's a short range, even though it has a short range for a ranged unit, it's pretty good at disrupting enemies because it knocks them around. So that is the Peltast. Definitely a really good early game unit. If you're playing as the Darknuts, you'll definitely want to get several of these as soon as possible. They're pretty good. And then the fourth Darknut unit that you can train is actually a siege unit. It is the Ares. At least I think it's pronounced Ares. I believe it's pronounced Ares because it's a Greek word, and it makes me think of, the Greek god of war Ares, but I'm not actually sure if that's the proper pronunciation. So if you know what the proper pronunciation is, go ahead and correct me. I'm just going to call it the Ares, but it is their ram. At a glance, it's not particularly special. It's just a simple battering ram. You bring it up to a building, and it bashes the building, and the building falls down. But the unique thing about this ram is actually the material that it's made of. It is incredibly resistant to ranged attacks, including fire damage, and throwing bombs and shooting fire at battering rams is usually a really good tactic. These battering rams, however, are very resistant to that, so the only way to effectively stop them is to leave the comfort of your base and melee them to death with your melee troops. So the Darknuts have a very, very, very good early game. I actually would describe it as mid-game just because of its cost, even though you can train it in the early game. But it's a really, really good battering ram for how early you can bring it out. It's very resistant to ranged attacks and magic attacks. So that is the Ares, the Darknut battering ram. So that is it for their kind of light, cheap, unarmored sort of units. And now we're getting into the really heavy stuff, the kind of awesome units. So I'll go ahead and train them. Alrighty. This is where the Darknuts start to really shine. They're heavily, heavily armored units, and they have quite a few of them. As you can see, they're extremely slow. So if you're going against most other factions, you won't want nothing but these guys, because most other factions will just be able to kite them. So you'll definitely want to back them up with the faster Darknut units, but these guys are really cool. As I showed in the other video, they can all deal knockback damage. So just one of these guys can take on like 20 Knights of Hyrule and just mop the floor with them. They're incredibly powerful, especially in a melee. The best way to deal with Darknuts is to throw units that are immune to knockback at them. So a lot of cavalry is really resistant to knockback. So like heavy cavalry is really good to use against these guys. Mages are really good because they have no magic armor except for this guy here, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So the Zora can just send 5 of their shock mages to electrocute this guy to death before he even gets close to them. So throwing mages at them is pretty good. Bomb throwers that the Gorons have is good, and anything that does like explosive damage, fire damage, magic damage, or anything immune to knockback will be good against them. Otherwise, you'll want to stay really clear of these guys. Do not send melee units against them. They will lose. They will lose. Nothing can stop them at a melee unless, they're resistant to knockback. But anyway, the first of their heavily armored units is the Legionary. This guy right here. He is, I would call him the bread and butter unit of the Darknuts. They're probably the unit you will train the most of. As I said before, they're very heavily armored. They're very, very good in a melee. Unlike these 3 guys here, though, they don't deal splash damage, so they can only hit one guy at a time in front of them. So that's kind of why you might want to gravitate towards one of these 3 units when you have the resources. But these guys are really powerful. If someone goes against them in a melee, they'll just whack them with the sword, and they'll go flying back about 30 feet. So yeah, that is the Legionary. Not particularly special, other than the fact that they're incredibly powerful. And they're just really cool. So, next up is the Doom Knocker. This guy here. Actually, before I continue on, I guess I just wanted to say that the design for this guy is based on the Darknut from Wind Waker. It's a little more obvious when they level up and the color of their armor changes, because the Darknuts from Wind Waker had red and silver armor, and this guy has black armor. But when he levels up, he gets the red and silver armor, but I'll show that later. So next up is the Doom Knocker, which is based on the Darknut, one of the Darknuts from Twilight Princess. It is the one armed with a mace and a shield. So since he has a shield, he is actually pretty resistant to archers. So if you want to take these guys down, I don't recommend using archers. Stick with mages or heavy cavalry. And he's got a big mace, so he does blunt damage. And unlike the Legionary, he also deals splash damage, so he'll hit everything in front of him and send them flying about 30 feet back. So very, very, very powerful unit. Pound for pound anyway. Obviously there's ways to take them down, and again, he's incredibly slow, so cavalry can easily overtake these guys and wipe them out. But yeah, if you need to deal lots of crush damage, I would get these guys out. Because they deal crush damage, they're actually kind of good against buildings too, so they're kind of a sort of siege unit. I would not describe them necessarily as a siege unit, kind of more like I almost want to say like a support siege unit, but yeah, that is the Doom Knocker. Next up is the Germafencer, which is based on, I don't think they're, yeah, they are called Darknuts in Zelda 2. It's based on one of the bosses from Zelda 2, which I think only appeared, correct me if I'm wrong, but I actually think it's only in the American version of the game. I don't think the Japanese version of the game had this guy in it. It might be the other way around, but I seem to remember fighting this guy in that game, so I think it's the American version that has him. But yeah, this is the Germafencer, which is even bigger than these two guys. Like the Doom Knocker, he's got a shield and a sword. And, well, actually, the Doom Knocker has a mace, not a sword. But like the Doom Knocker, he deals splash damage, so everything in front of him will go flying. But the unique thing about this guy is he has a slight bit of magic resistance. So mages can't bring him down quite as easily as they could other Darknut guys. So if you're going against the Zoras and they're spamming a bunch of mages, you might want to shift to these guys. Although if you are playing as the Zoras and they start spamming these guys, you'll want to get your elephant cavalry out, because they are immune to knockback and they can trample over these guys with their heavy armor. But yeah, that's the Germafencer. It's basically a magic resistant version of the Legionary, and it deals splash damage too, so that is a pretty cool unit. And then technically it's not the last of their heavily armored units, but it's one of the last. It is the Rebenak, also from the second Zelda game. It is this huge Darknut on a very heavily armored giant horse, and these guys also deal splash damage. They deal tons of knockback, so they'll send units flying, and like these two guys, they are very resistant to everything except for magic. So they're extremely powerful. They're still prone to damage from spearmen units, so if you really want to take them down, a bunch of spearmen will do the job, or just slaughter them with magic and stuff like that. But even though they're a cavalry unit, they're actually pretty slow for a cavalry unit, as you can see here. I mean, they're faster than these guys here on foot, but if you played Ordana, you know how fast their cavalry is. So these guys are pretty slow for a guy on a horse, but they're very powerful. Very expensive too, so I would consider them a very late game unit. Alright, so that is the really heavily armored units in their roster. Now, one of the features the Darknuts are going to have, which might change if it proves to be too powerful, is they will be able to train every mercenary in the game. I'm adding all of the mercenaries into the game, so I will do a separate video on all the mercenaries and how they work and stuff like that. But in the meantime, the Darknuts have 4 mercenary units that only they can recruit, which I will go ahead and train now. And yep, I think that's all 4. So let me get these guys all spread out. Actually, it looks like one of them got stuck on the trees. That is unfortunate. Let me set the rally point over here. Yep, the poor Focalista got stuck on the trees, so I need to tweak this map so that the tree line here is a little bit further away from the Darknut bases, so we can avoid that happening. Anyway. Okay, so, the first unique mercenary that the Darknuts have, and it's actually a really important unit because of how fast they are. This is, I think, the fastest unit? No, it's the second fastest unit in the Darknut arsenal, and it is the Foca. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but it is the Foca Hypaspist. I think I said that right. So, these guys are really fast for an infantry unit. They have pretty decent armor for a mercenary unit, and they have a shield, so they're slightly resistant to archers. And when we have abilities added into the game, they will have like this huge leaping ability where they can jump at like a target location, so they'll be able to jump over rivers and cliffs and chasms and things like that. So this guy in his fully realized form is going to be extremely maneuverable, extremely fast, and a very, very valuable tool for the Darknuts. And they're not too expensive. They only cost rupees, so if you're doing really good with rupees, you'll be able to hire quite a lot of them. Yeah, they're a very good unit to pair up with the slower units, because you can kind of use them to harass archers and the faster units that might slowly pick off their heavily armored units. So yeah, that is the Foca Hypaspist. You'll definitely want quite a few of them. Next up is the Mazra Hypicon, which, like the Foca and several of the Darknut designs, is from the second Zelda game. It is the kind of, not a centaur, but it's kind of like a humanoid horse creature, and it's got a mace, so it deals crush damage. Kind of like the Foca, one of the uses of these guys is how fast they are. They're not quite as fast as cavalry, but they're very fast for an infantry unit. So you'll definitely want to field these guys to back up your very slow units. One of the unique features of this unit is, even though it is an infantry unit, it has all of the bonuses and statistics of cavalry, but none of the weaknesses of cavalry. So spearmen actually won't be really good against these guys, even though they deal a lot of the same stuff that cavalry does. So they're kind of like a weird hybrid of an infantry and cavalry unit, which is pretty cool. Cavalry is an area that the Darknuts are not very good at, so anything they can have that's kind of like cavalry is pretty good to them. Next up actually is a cavalry unit, and it is the Lionel Pride, which are based on the Lionels from the original Zelda game, so they actually look like lions, unlike some of the later designs. And they are, I'm pretty sure they're the fastest unit. Yeah, they're definitely the fastest unit the Darknuts have. They're kind of their only true generic cavalry unit. They got a shield, so they're resistant to archers, and they got a sword, so yeah. They don't deal knockback damage, though, so unlike most of the Darknut units, they won't send people flying everywhere, but since they're a fast cavalry unit, you'll still want quite a few of them in your armies, just for the speed alone. That's kind of the case with most of the Darknut mercenary units. They're all very fast, like the 3 I just showed. They're all speed-based, so they're kind of complementing probably the biggest weakness in the Darknut's army, which is speed. So yeah, that is the Lionel Pride. And then the 4th unit is the ranged siege unit that the Darknuts can field. It is the Focalista. It's not a very, very strong siege unit, and its range isn't that big, but probably the main advantage of it is, since it's a mercenary, it only costs rupees, because a lot of siege engines cost quite a bit of material to train, but these only cost rupees, so That's kind of the one sort of unique thing about him. Otherwise, it's not too special. It's just kind of a normal generic siege engine you can use to take down towers and walls. So I think that is it for their unique mercenaries. The Darknuts will have access to all the mercenaries in the game, but as I said, I'll detail all the mercenaries in a separate video, probably after I do a video on the heroes for the Darknuts and the Moblins. But anyway, next up is, oh yeah, their commander units and support units and whatnot. So get these guys spaced out. So the Darknut commander unit is called the I'm actually not sure if it's pronounced Dux or Du, but it's spelled D-U-X, which is named after a type of Roman commander. But they are the Darknut's commander unit. Their kind of ability is that every soldier that can gain levels that is within, their ring here, it requires less experience for them to level up. Or rather, they gain experience faster when they kill enemies. So if you have one of these guys in your army, your normal soldiers will be leveling up a lot faster than they would otherwise. So other than their special ability, they're really similar to the Legionary. They're kind of just like a normal swordsman unit. They deal splash damage and knockback, so they're really powerful. But their main purpose is to make it so your armies level up faster. So yeah, that is the Dux. I'm just going to call him Dux because when he levels up into a Mighty, I can call him a Mighty Dux. But anyway, next up is the Idle Throne, which is this guy right here. What the Idle Throne does is it's a non-combat unit, so it can't attack enemies, but it basically supercharges all of the Darknuts fighting within this ring here. It makes them move faster, attack faster, deal more damage, their armor's more resistant. It makes your army just really, really that much stronger. But if the Idle Throne is killed in a fight, if it dies, everything that is in this ring for, I think it's about 30 seconds, will suffer a very, very massive penalty. So they'll move slower, they'll deal less damage. Basically, the death of their idol causes them to have an existential crisis. So these guys are kind of like a high-risk, high-reward unit. If you have one, it's going to really dramatically improve your army. But if your enemy has a bunch of ranged units and they focus fire on them and they manage to kill them, it's going to backfire on you, and your army is going to suffer really, really massive penalties until the effects wear off. So yeah, that is the Idle Throne. Even though I don't know how often I would use them because I'd be kind of afraid of the penalties, I really like the unit. I just like how this guy sits on the throne and the four guys carry him around. It's very Persian of them. But anyway, this guy right here is actually one of the hero units, so I won't go into any details about him. You know what? Screw it. I'll show you what this unit does because it's really cool, but I won't go into excessive detail about it. But this unit, what's really cool about them is if you played Twilight Princess, which it's based off of one of the designs from Twilight Princess, but every time you kill this unit, instead of dying, chunks of its armor fall off. So you have to kill this unit multiple times to get all the chunks of armor to fall off. And not only that, but you can repair the armor that has fallen off for a small price. So if you manage to get this guy out of combat and you have enough time to repair his armor, it's actually cheaper to repair these guys instead of letting them die and training new ones. So these guys are extremely hard to kill. That's kind of their gimmick. You have to just obsessively bombard them with stuff. Otherwise, they'll just keep fixing their armor and coming back. But I'll go ahead and manually kill him so you can see the armor falling off. So there, he just killed him, and as you saw, one of his pauldrons fell off and one of his hip plates. And then this option right here came back where you can repair the armor. I'll go ahead and do that. Now his armor's repaired. But Yeah, you just, I think you have to kill him 4 times for all of the armor to fall off. And also, each time he loses parts of his armor, his movement speed increases too. So he's already moving a little bit faster. There, now all of his armor's fallen off, and he's way faster. And then you can just pay a little bit of money to repair his suit of armor. So yeah, that is one of the hero units. I will go into a little tiny bit more detail about them in the hero video. I just thought it was worth showing them right now because that's so cool. And if you're able to micro them enough to where you're repairing their armor in battle, it'll look really cool after a huge fight. You just see like the little bits of armor all over the ground everywhere. That'll look really cool. Anyway, what other units do they have? They have 2 more units, I believe. Oh no, they have more hero units, but they have 1 more just kind of normal unit that they can train. This is the Darknut Immortal, which is basically a mummy. It is a mage unit, and it deals fire damage. It is loosely based on the Anubis from Ocarina of Time. It's basically a living version of the Anubis from Ocarina of Time. That is how I would describe them. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Darknuts are very lacking in ranged units. Their units are very slow, and they don't have a lot of magic options, except for this unit here. So it is a ranged mage, which makes it incredibly valuable. Not only that, but it's pretty fast because she hovers around. And because she hovers, she can go over any terrain. So it's a very maneuverable Darknut unit. It's a late game unit though, so they're pretty expensive. You won't be getting them until late in the game, but if you manage to get them, they're very, very valuable because of the magic damage that they deal. And you can upgrade them with what I just researched here. And once you upgrade them, they have this little circle around them. Any unit that is within this circle gets magic armor. So if you're going against a faction that is fielding a lot of mages, if you have some of these paired with your slow guys, she'll protect them from magic damage. Not completely, but she'll make them more resistant so they won't die quite as fast to mages. So yeah, the Immortals are incredibly valuable, especially in the late game. And another ability that they have is when they die, there is a 20% chance that their corpse will start to reanimate and they'll come back to life. So kind of like the last unit I showed, they can be hard to kill, but they're not quite as unkillable as these guys here, because there's a chance that they will just die right away when they get killed. So what else am I going to show? I will show their units leveling up. So I'll go ahead and level up the Doom Knocker here. I placed a bunch of Gerudo down here that are worth lots of experience points. So like every Gerudo or 2 that he kills should gain him a level. So I'll just have him go kill this one right here. As we slowly wait for him to march all the way across the sands to fight them. So there are 4 levels that these Darknut units can have. There's the one they start at, which is the Adept. Their armor is black when they're Adepts. As you can see, he deals knockback damage, so he flings units around when he hits them like that. That's so great. I love that. He's just whacking them. And he just gained a level, which is why his armor turned red. Kill this guy first. Okay, kill her already. Wow, that Gerudo is taking quite a beating. There, finally she died. Anyway, so he gained a level and his armor turned red. So yeah, as I was saying, the first level is called the Adept. That is the Darknuts with the black armor. When they gain a level, they become Mighties. So this guy is now a Mighty Doom Knocker. And when they're Mighties, their armor turns red. And whenever a Darknut unit gains a level, their HP goes up, their attack damage goes up, their armor values go up. They just become kind of stronger in general. And then the next level is called a Master, which I'll go ahead and kill some more Gerudo so he can level up again. As he slowly marches to his next target. Very slowly. I just love how... Oh, there, he gained a level. And now his armor turns silver. I'll go ahead and let him finish off this Gerudo before I show him. Okay. So, oh, this next one came to attack him. Anyway, while he's attacking her, I'll just, I guess, go into detail. But the silver ones are called Masters. And he just gained another level. But anyway, like the last level, he gained improved stats and everything. And then the final level, which is the golden armor, is a legendary. So this guy is now a legendary Doom Knocker. When we add the glow shader into the engine, their armor is actually going to glow a little bit. But yeah, the final level that they can gain is gold. So legendary versions of their units are incredibly strong and really hard to kill. So if you manage to get a Darknut to this point, they're super powerful. They're like the strongest units in the game. But yeah, that is how the Darknuts level up. They can level up through combat. They will have a structure called the Coliseum, which I'll go ahead and build down here. Where is it? Where's the Coliseum? There it is. They have this Coliseum here where you can garrison their units inside of it. And then they'll fight, and they'll slowly gain experience points and level up. So if you want to if you're kind of on the defensive and you're not attacking your enemies and you don't want your units to just sit there and do nothing, you can garrison several of them in here to slowly gain experience points and level up that way. So there'll be other ways that they can level up other than just killing enemies. When we add dungeons and puzzles into the game, they might be able to gain experience points that way. But yeah. The Darknuts are really awesome. They're probably my favorite faction right now. I really, really like how they play. I really love how their bases work. I love how freaking powerful half of their units are, even if they're really, really slow. I will go ahead and show their Titan, I suppose, and their Wonder. There's actually a little bug right now that Exodarian's hopefully going to fix before I release this publicly. But to get their Wonder, you have to upgrade their central building into it. And their Wonder is the Tower of Hera from A Link to the Past. As far as the little bug that he's fixing, if you probably noticed all the little plots around it disappeared. So if you are a patron and you're playing this, because this will probably be released when this video is playing, do not get the Wonder until you've upgraded all of the plots. Otherwise, this will happen to you. But yeah, that is the Darknut Wonder. It is the Tower of Hera, and it is probably going to be like the second tallest building in the game. And I usually save the Titans for the hero video, but I'll go ahead and show their Titan. I won't go into detail about their Titan, but I'll go ahead and show him. So there is the Darknut Titan, and if you do not recognize who this is, then you are wrong. He's pretty awesome, but I'll go ahead and show him in the hero video. I just wanted to show their Titan, just what he looks like before I go into details. So yeah, that is the Darknuts in a nutshell. I'm trying to think if there's any other features of theirs before I end this video. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think... Oh, of course, I almost forgot the last thing. The way that Darknuts expand their territory and get more bases. So let me go ahead and get this army together. I'll exclude... Now I'll go ahead and have the ram tag along. So, as I mentioned earlier, Darknut workers cannot build a new civil center. So they can't pick where they want to build a new base. If you have played Warhammer Gladius, and if you played as the Necrons from Warhammer Gladius, then you probably have an idea of how they expand bases. Every map has these ruins, which all the factions can capture, and they can use them to train the little Armo statues. But the Darknuts, if they capture these ruins, they can convert them into a smaller version of their base. So I will go ahead and capture these ruins right here and go ahead and demonstrate that. So yeah, their armory moves really slowly, so I'll go ahead and increase the game speed so that they get there really fast. Now, the Armos are immune to knockback, so if you're fighting against the Darknuts, training a bunch of Armos is a good idea. As you can see, they killed that Rebenak really quickly because they're immune to the knockback. There goes the Peltasts throwing their little javelins. And then their heavily armored units are still way back here. The battering ram is just bashing them. That's really funny. I don't even know if the battering ram is helping because they're really only good against buildings. They're completely ignoring the ram. Actually, that ram did a lot of damage to that one Arma statue. That legendary guy just slaughtered them in like one hit. That's really cool. So let's go ahead and capture these ruins here, and then I can show you how they upgrade them into a base. So yeah, if you have units that are resistant to knockback, they're really, really good against the Darknut. So you'll want to capture the ruins, not only to prevent the Darknuts from building more bases, but you can start training Arma statues, which are actually really good against them, because they're resistant to knockback, so they won't get flung around everywhere, and they can just keep dishing out damage to these guys. So yeah. But if you're playing as the Darknuts, you'll want to capture these ruins, both to deny your enemy access to Armo statues, and so you can expand your bases. So there, now these guys have captured this, and yeah, you can train Arma statues at the ruins. I think I actually showed those in a video from like 2 years ago. But anyway, the most important part is that you can upgrade it into a Darknut base, which not only can it train workers and stuff, but it can also still train the Arma statues from the ruins. So that's really cool. So yeah, that is how the Darknuts get more bases and expand their territory. Kind of like I showed with the Wonder, there's kind of a bug right now where it's not spawning the little plots around them. Exodarian's working on that. So when I release this publicly, that should be fixed. But yeah, I think that is all of the main Darknut features. Trying to make sure I didn't forget anything. I'm pretty sure that's all their main features. Yeah, I showed the little supply carts. Yeah, so in the next video I will show their 4 heroes, the 4 hero units associated with them, and same thing with the Moblins. I'll show their 4 heroes, and I'll show the Titan units for both the Darknuts and the Moblins. After that, I will probably do a video showing all of the mercenary units in the game. There's quite a few, and none of them are in the game yet, so it'll be pretty cool to show all of them. So yeah, if you are a patron, you are either playing this already or it'll be on Dropbox sometime shortly after this video goes up. So if you are a patron, again, just be aware that the plots will disappear around the civil structure when you upgrade it into a Wonder. Otherwise, if you are a patron, you'll be able to try out the Darknuts and all their features, and hopefully you guys think they're awesome. If you're not a patron, I'll probably have this out in a month, and then all you guys can play is the Darknuts and the Moblins, and hopefully these 2 factions bring in a lot of people. I have a feeling the Darknuts are going to be really, really popular. I kind of love them right now, and I think people will just have a lot of fun churning out armies of these huge knights that can just beat the crap out of everything. But anyway, that was the Darknut Legion. Hopefully you guys think they look cool, and look forward to the next video. Have a good one.